I know I've made a video already going over why I think capitalism doesn't work, and there are probably more arguments I could make, but really I think anarcho-capitalism deserves its own video. It's far from any capitalism we've ever seen today, and honestly, the more I've learned about it, the more it scares me. So we're going to go through the main points of why anarcho-capitalism is just batshit crazy. As anarcho-capitalism believes that everything should be privatized, with no state of any kind. One of the first things that comes to mind is, what about the police and emergency services? Well, ANCAP say that there should be security companies that people can pay to protect themselves. So this means that if you cannot afford to pay for private security, you're open to having any crime of any sort afflicted on you, with the persecutor getting away with it all. But I suppose there would be no such thing as crime because there'd be no such thing as law either. So what would different companies would enforce would vary. To add to this though, I've seen multiple ANCAPs say that the companies won't actually act as police do today. They'll only exist to protect private property. So this basically means unless you own private property, you're exposed to pretty much anything people want to do to you. How can this be desirable in a society is beyond me. Moving on, ANCAPs are also against democracy. This is because they fear tyranny of the majority. Now, I sympathise with ANCAPs and libertarians here that I don't believe that actions I take that only affect myself should be influenced by anyone else. However, ANCAPs say let's full out remove democracy of any kind instead of let's prevent democracy from, making me make my own life choices that have no effect on anyone else but me. Without a state or any way for people to make decisions as a collective, everyone really is at the mercy of corporations, as they would be the only people with any power. There wouldn't be anything wrong with a corporation hindering your own personal liberties, but I guess it's only bad when a state does it, right? Even outside of your work, which by the way you'll most likely be working extremely long hours as there's not anything to stop corporations from making you at the threat of losing your job, you'll basically be a bitch to any and all monopolies that will inevitably form over time. ANCAPs do not believe that in a true market monopolies will form, but let's look at the private security idea again, and here's an example of what's going to happen. Hey, we're a new security company that would love your business. Oh, can you guys offer more protection than my current service? Well, seeing as we're smaller, no. Okay, well this is my personal safety here, so, oh, I'm sorry, private property, so I can't risk it by switching to a company that could potentially be better in the future. And this just repeats itself until everyone's using the same company, creating a monopoly that can and will charge whatever they like for their service, because again, it's people's personal safety, they're going to pay it. If a monopoly can form in one industry, it can form in others just as easily, seeing as an extremely successful company could just go ahead and buy out every other company in a certain industry in the first place. Another important consequence of everything being privatized is information and media sources. We already see today that when companies own media, the content of the media platform is always skewed to support the interests of the company that owns it. For example, let's look at global warming. Both sides of this debate are basically claiming the same thing against different people. People that think global warming is a myth believe that information is given to say it's real is to support the interests of the state and certain corporations close to the state. While people who say that global warming is real say that the information to say it's a myth exists only because not having regulations on pollution, for example, is in the interest of a lot of corporations. So basically we have two sides here claiming that something cannot be true because it's only being put that way to make money for someone. Don't you see how this will play out in an anarcho-capitalist society? Any media source will always be giving information to support the interests of whatever company owns it. What's worse is that people would have no idea what to believe, as literally any information source will always have a company behind it that stands to gain something. People won't be able to use data because that argument will always get thrown in their face of, but that data is biased towards X company. I'm aware that in today's society we also have a problem with media information sources, but socialists want to make this problem better by removing profit as an incentive to intentionally misinterpret data, while ANCAPs only want to make the problem worse. What really gets me is that ANCAPs revolve their ideology around the idea of freedom. It just so happens that this version of freedom means having a very select group of people have the freedom to do whatever the fuck they want. Freedom ends when it limits other people's freedoms, but from what I can tell, ANCAPs only want freedom for anyone running a business. My point is how ANCAPs advocate so much for freedom, but then they want a society that results in the majority of people's freedom being prevented. I was also thinking, what happens if there's ever a market crash? In the 1930s Great Depression in America, there was a largely free market that had a brilliant economy up until 1929. Then for the next 6 years, or however long it was, I do forget, there was a huge economic instability and millions of people were losing jobs. It wasn't until intervention in the economy that things gradually started to improve, and that eventually the war stimulated the economy back to full health. Without this intervention, though, it's reasonable to assume that recovery would have taken much longer, as the start of the crash, the president at the time, kept to his free market principles, claiming it would sort itself out, when instead it just got worse. What I'm saying here is, if something similar to the 1930 depression ever took place, and you can't really say it won't because markets are just so unpredictable, what happens? I mean, what do you do? This not only fucks over the workers, but also a lot of CEOs as well. I don't see how thinking, yeah, let's just leave this until it gets better by itself, assuming it ever will, is something people would actually want to do when it's been proven in the past that intervention actually makes things recover faster. Another actually really important part of anarcho-capitalism is how it deals with immigrants and refugees. Basically, ANCAPs say that no immigrants can be allowed into a country unless they're specifically wanted by a company to work for. Not that I'm sure who would be running the border control, but anyway. Basically what this means is that an immigrant needs to be given a job already before they can come into a country, as well as this they need private property to live on, so that as there won't be any kind of system to prevent them just living on the streets in this country. Let's think about this for a minute. Say you're living in a country, you have a pretty average life and you get by with your family. One day this country is victim to internal conflict and groups start raiding communities, forcing people to join up or just flat out killing civilians. And you have two options. You can either stay in your country and most likely have you and your family be killed, or you can flee to a safer countries without these problems. But hold on, does anyone actually want you in this country? Well, consider yourself lucky, because the local king, CEO, has generously offered you to live in his private property in exchange for your labour. Of course, this won't include a wage, because there's no minimum wage anymore, and you have to live by whatever rules the CEO wants you to, as it's his land. But hey, it's much better than being brutally murdered, right? Tell me, does this sound familiar to something? Kind of like a system we had before capitalism, maybe with a king of some kind or serf, something like that. I really can't remember, but anyway, you get the point with this. What really tops it off though, what really gets me all about this is that for the most part, ANCAPs won't even refute these points. I've heard a lot of ANCAPs say it's not anarcho-capitalism's job to be utilitarian or provide the best standard of living for people because it's all about having freedom. Well, let me tell you, ANCAPs, it really, really is your job to provide a functioning society if you want to impose your twisted ideology on all of us. The well-being of people in a society and the justice of its system is the most important part of any ideology, but somehow ANCAPs are ignoring these things. That's why I think anarcho-capitalism is just full of bullshit, and God help us if we ever have to live in it. I mean, even if you don't think communism would work at all, at least our actual goal is to create a society that's fair and livable. I can't really say the same for anarcho-capitalism. Thanks for watching.